Dr. Fatih Birol, the President of International Energy Agency, distinguished members of the board of IICEC, sectoral leaders, opinion leaders, consulates general, ambassadors, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the press. The theme of today's conference is sustainable energy and the business world. Energy security has been an important aspect in coping against climate change, with various subtitles and headlines relating to environmental, social, economic matters. So sustainability is a key issue for us in all dimensions, and we are eager to find and implement solutions also for sustainable energy. The concept of sustainable energy relates to environmental sustainability, protection of environment, energy security, and its relevance to development and the use of resources in a more efficient way. These are all the subtitles that would be relevant to sustainable energy that would provide enormous and critical relevance for today's world. Therefore, as a guarantee for the future, sustainable energy is no longer an environmental preference, but at the same time an economic and social obligation. Today, the President of International Energy Agency and Honorary President of IICEC, Dr. Birol, is once again with us, so I would like to thank him once again for spending time in this matter. So therefore, it will be another occasion for the IICEC conference to make a perspective for the future, and we'll have the privilege of listening from him this window for the future. With an intensive request from our conference participants, Dr. Birol has kindly accepted to spend more time for the Q&A session. In this way, we'll be happy to accept more questions for him. After his talk, the trends, obligations, challenges and opportunities panel will take place with the participation of opinion leaders, particularly women representatives of the energy sector. With the guidance of Dr. Birol, all the panel has been comprised of ladies. And we have to emphasize that IICEC has been attaching importance to this matter. In a global scale, IICEC has been a platform to bring together women entrepreneurs, representatives, and MIT Energy Initiative, Stanford Energy, and C3E, Clean Energy Education Empowerment and Education Energy and Empowerment 3E initiative has also been actively supported by IICEC since 2013. The female representatives of the sector are also supported by these universities, and every year award ceremonies take place. Mrs. Nursal Ölmez Ateş from Borusal Holding, Ms. Ebru Dildar Eding from a Sustainable Development Association, the president of the board, Filiz Gökler, Baker Hughes, Turkey Country Director, and Mehtap Anık Zorbazan from Enerjisa as an independent member of the executive board will be attending the panel. With all the experiences shared, this guidance will be provided by the panel. From the very beginning, distinguished members of the board of IICEC are together with us from ALC, Toyota Turkey, BP, Borusan, Enerjisa, Eren Holding, ING Turkey, Sanko Energy, Shell, Sokar, and Zorlu Energy. Would like to thank all of our members for their distinguished support and would like to extend our gratitude to you, our participants. After the talk by Dr. Birol, we will keep him on stage for just a few moments to take a photograph of the day. And now I would like to invite Dr. Fatih Birol, President of the International Energy Agency, for the keynote presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, welcome. Good morning. I have the privilege of attending IICEC meeting for once again, and today actually we are here to talk around two issues. One will be a brief introduction of the global energy market. I will update you briefly about what's been going on in this sector lately. And secondly, I will try and provide you a perspective to the EU economic industrial world of welcoming a new era. And in this current time, we need to discuss why there has been this need for a new era and what options are there on the table. These will be the two matters that I will try and discuss around with relevance to the global energy market, and then we'll take a look at the Americas situation on energy. And there is a special request, as you know, for the Q&A session. And I will do my best to keep my thoughts brief and to spare some time for the questions and answers. Well, I would like to first start with the oil markets, which I think is still the most important strategic commodity. And the price is around $90 currently. For countries importing oil, I think this is really a high figure in terms of current deficit. Well, as we look at the market, we recognize that this year's oil demand is quite weak compared to previous years, and we're speaking about 1 million barrel of growth annually. And the main reason, there are two reasons basically for this weakening. The first one is about the Chinese economy getting into a stagnation time, and the second one is electrical vehicles increasing their share gradually, but still there is around 1 million barrels of demand. For production, on the other hand, we can speak about essentially a significant increase in production in the American continent, United States, Canada, Brazil, and I think it's appearing as a new basin altogether. There is a significant raise in their share of production, and yet the prices floating up to $90 are basically due to two reasons. One is OPEC Plus countries, particularly Saudi Arabia and Russia, are leading the path for limiting their production merely because of political reasons to put pressure to the upside steps of the ladder. It's come to such a level that the capacity of idle production, which is the spare capacity, has reached historical levels with 6 million barrels. I think it's really a plus production, which is at a historical level. And there is a cost attached to it as well, of course. This is number one reason. And secondly, as we're all following, the tense situation in Middle East. But I need to think about it from different corners, like 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago. You would look at the Middle East, and again, the missiles were just flying in Middle East, and that was a period of time the missiles were just coming from different corners, and $90 would then look like a reasonable level. As for natural gas, in the natural gas markets, there is something that is quite to the update discussion. and then I will look into the change we're expecting. The current situation is the European markets that we're in vicinity to. When we look at the European markets, before the start of the war, the prices of natural gas were at the level of $5. During the war, like 2020, 2023, raised up to $40. Right now, we're speaking about less than $10, which is at the reasonable level back again. So I need to say that we have all witnessed a significant decline in natural gas prices. But if you would ask me, this is good news for Turkey, if only you can use your cards cleverly. But, as of 2025 or 26, we can speak about a very big LNG, liquefied natural gas supply coming into the market. Some are speaking about 5-6 years, or some are just extending it up to 10 years. But many of the projects that have started 10 years ago back in line are now about to finish. So from Qatar, there will be a significant amount of liquefied natural gas to be shipped to global markets, which will change many balances. I mean, just leaving aside the political aspects, I basically can see that simply so far the sellers were quite strong at hand. But now we're going to switch to a market that the buyers will have a strong hand. And to be precise, sellers will no longer be that strong. So the buyers, on the other hand, will become stronger. So what kind of steps we need to take, not only in Turkey, but also in other countries, we will look and see. I think there will be a lot of pressure on the prices downwards. And to make it understandable for you or scalable for your thoughts, I mean, 2025 through 27, the LNG amount of LNG that will be shipped to the market will be half of the amount of natural gas that have been furnished in 10 years. Only 3 years will have this amount to be shipped to the market, which will lead to major changes. Coming to coal. Now, the appetite for coal is now diminished, except for just a few countries. And essentially, it's not because of environmental reasons, but essentially it's because of more cost-effective options coming up. Environmental, meaning leading to air pollution rather than climate change. Only China and India insist in using and establishing new coal facilities, but compared to the past, I think it's just growing quite slowly. Well, the shining star, as I keep saying, is renewables. I think the most striking figure to give you as a good summary of the situation is that last year, 2023, in the world, when we look at the commissioned electrical power plants or facilities introduced globally, more than 80% is renewables in these facilities all alone. And the biggest share there is solar. And essentially, this is because of the costs getting down to incredibly low levels. Well, for a new facility to be established from scratch now, solar and in some countries wind constitute the most cost-effective options. Climate change, yes, it's a factor, but essentially it's because of the lowering costs. And China has been leading and dominating the segment of the sector as well. Last year, 2023, there was a historical record globally, more than 500, to be precise, 510 gigawatts of renewables introduced into the grid. And China, of course, played a major part there. This is good news, but the bad news is that looking at the electricity sector, the biggest trouble is the grids globally. Well, we've looked into the grids all over the world, and I will give you a striking info, which is strategically relevant, is 500 gigawatts connected to the grid, but 1,500 gigawatts of ready and usable renewable energy just remains idle there, just because the capacity of the grid not being sufficient. Therefore, this is the same everywhere in the world, and this is one of the most acute problems. Europe is really the critical point. America, Japan, and China still are problematic. This remains a major issue, and I think we need to work with many countries together to find a solution for the stagnation in connection to the grid. This is something that we're trying to solve. You may be building very nice renewable energy facilities, but the output of these facilities will remain idle unless they can be connected to the grid properly. Nuclear energy. Well, some of you might ask me, there are people that I know I've been talking to for the last few years. I keep saying that nuclear power may just come back. I've been seeing the signals of nuclear coming back, and as of today, I can frankly say that nuclear is just coming back all over the world. And this is something we need to calculate now. How will it come back? In three ways. The first is nuclear power plants to be decommissioned, and the country is saying that they will no longer use nuclear anymore, have now switched their minds. They've changed their opinion. Like Japan, for instance, they're now recommissioning the existing nuclear power plant. Korea, the same, and Sweden, the same. All of these countries now are changing their minds into reusing their existing nuclear power plants and the maximum capacity possible. Secondly, nuclear power plants are now to be commissioned in many countries, and the number of the countries opposing to nuclear is just on the decline, and it's just being led by China, as always. But also in France, in Poland, Turkey, and United States, new conventional nuclear power plants are now being built, and some have already been also in use. And there is an appetite for building new ones as well. But in general, I need to say that although there are many problems attached to nuclear, mainly financial, but interest in nuclear is on the rise. We do expect by 2025 or maximum 26 to have a nuclear power plant electricity generation to peak out. But why is that interest in the nuclear? The main reasons, basically we're speaking about two reasons for this re-entry of nuclear into the system, is energy security, number one reason. Because, particularly in many European countries, there has been this critical time during the war that they were deprived of sources for generating their own electricity. And secondly, of course, for the nuclear power, there are no emissions for carbon dioxide, which makes it quite advantageous. Well, if we'll look at the markets then, or the figures, there is something that needs to be uttered about emissions, which is in 2023, we have again seen a slowdown in the growth of carbon dioxide emissions, down to 1%. And quite interestingly, the group of countries that are named as developed countries like America, Japan, Europe, Canada, their emission levels in 2023 was dropped down to level of 1970s. This has been an enormous decline. The emissions are now down to that level, and the economy has tripled in GDP. But most of the emissions are derived from developing countries. But particularly with the entry of renewables and increase of the share in renewables, and particularly with China and the Chinese economy getting into a stagnation or a slowdown, to be accurate, I need to say that if the world expects to get a stop in the emission release, or maybe to peak out in that respect, we shouldn't be surprised at all. Well, this is broadly what I can summarize to you about fuel options and emissions. Secondly, I'd like to touch upon the European Union. Why? Well, number one is European Union is economically in the verge of a decision because of the developments in energy. And secondly, of course, for us, for Turkey, I think this has always been the most important trade partner. Therefore, we need to appreciate the developments in this continent or in this union. Well, EU energy prices, energy security, economy, all in these domains. If we look at this the equation, we understand that it's just getting into troubled times, basically due to three reasons. And I mean, I had an article that was published in the Financial Times. Basically, I discussed the same things. European Union made three major strategic mistakes in recent past, and they're paying the bill for that. Number one is being dependent on one country for energy totally. Doesn't matter which country that is, even if that's the most innocent country, it is not reasonable to be dependent on a third party. Which country was that? Now this time it was Russia. EU, as of February the 24th, 2 years ago, 75% of natural gas and 65% of oil was supplied from Russia to the EU. Well, it's about not putting all the eggs in the same basket, which was a mistake for Europe. And the industrial model that was applied in the EU became a dependent model for Russia, which I think is the most important mistake. You cannot be dependent on a single country for energy. That would be a severe mistake, because one day everything is just sunshine and the next day the storm would come. This was mistake number one. The second mistake that the EU made was 25 years ago precisely, they decided to abandon nuclear power. 25 years ago, it was 1/3 of the energy source they were using. Due to ideological reasons or whatever reasons, I don't know, they turned back to nuclear power. Now it's down to 15%, 15% of a share in the energy mosaic of Europe. They're changing things now, as I've mentioned, but this has weakened Europe's hand in the energy sector. because the electricity they're generating in their own soil, and there is no problem at all. I mean, one button you need to press and electricity will come in grid. Particularly due to the attitude of some politicians, and some changed their minds. And this major strategic mistake was made in Europe. I think this has been a historical mistake as well. And the third one I need to discuss is, as I say, solar now is just boosting its share, and solar is dominating the electricity sector all alone. And it's huge and it's incredible. And the solar panels that are being produced by 85% are produced in a single country, and that's China. And what is the mistake of Europe there? The mistake is that essentially in the manufacturing of the solar panels, Europe started solar panel manufacturing 25 years ago. Italy, Germany, Spain. I mean, they really provided a lot of subsidies to the manufacturing of solar panels. They built everything, but then 5 years later, they quit it, and China came into play and is now dominating. I keep giving the same example. The other day I was in Brussels and I was addressing to the representatives of the European Union. It was like a marathon run to make clean energy available everywhere. Marathon is 42 kilometers, and if you want to take the medal, the gold medal, you need to finish off the 42 kilometers all along with a continuous strategy. What has Europe done? Finished off the first 10 kilometers as a leader, and then China completed the race as the gold medal winner. I think Europe made this strategic mistake, and now China is dominating all alone this solar technologies market, as manufacturing, making money, selling, as penetrating in different markets. And all these three mistakes that I've summarized, one being extremely dependent on a single country in energy, which I think is a lesson, take-home lesson. And number two is turning back to nuclear power, and three is failing in clean energies, technology manufacturing, and not being able to finish off this race and quitting the race earlier than expected have been the three mistakes that Europe made in the energy sector. Now is in a challenging situation, of course, but there is one thing we need to say. I mean, it's easy to criticize Europe, but some countries you cannot criticize that easily, like in Asia. You need to be cautious in criticizing other countries, but we need also to focus on the positive things as well. Under the circumstances, when Europe was caught to this crisis in February the 24th, and there was a halt, a stopping of the energy supplies from Russia, there have been a major challenge. But if we turn back and look into what's going on in the last 2 years, we need to say that Europe has done, well. No one froze to death in Europe, or the European economies have not failed at all. Maybe chance helped, and the weather was not that cold. This was really a good chance, but I need to say that European countries made a good solidarity and did their homework well and got out of the situation quite well. Von der Leyen, the EU president, said, and we've published an article together, why Europe has been successful and must be successful. Must be successful because Europe has three, there are three major economic powers in the world: America, China, and EU. India is coming up quite fast and joining into the game. And in the center of economy, there is manufacturing. There is this manufacturing industry, particularly in energy-intensive industries. or in these segments of the industry, there is an incredible disadvantage for Europe. As I say, I mean, natural gas prices are just coming down to $5, but in America it's under $2. And electricity prices in Europe is 3 times higher than in China. So if you're an industrialist, then calculating your manufacturing costs, 65% stands up for energy costs. And if this is the situation, then under these circumstances, with these costs, you will not be in the position of competing against neither China nor America. Now, this is the position of Europe. So what happens then? Well, what happens in Europe is, particularly in petrochemical industry and iron and steel, which are the energy-intensive industries, there are 2 trends going on now. Some would go for narrowing down their operations, and some for bankruptcy, and some opt to relocate their activities, like in Middle East or other countries. Germany's largest petrochemical company, and I'm not going to name, has decided to shift most of their activities to America, which will bring economic problems, employment issues, so on and so forth. Well, I'm just coming down to the end of my words, but and in Europe, there is something that I need to say. As of June, there will be new elections all through the EU. A new commission will be set up. And I think the most significant and I think the major homework that the Commission will be assigned to is to make a new industrial master plan. Under the existing circumstances, the industry will need to refocus its attention to traditional, conventional industrial segments like iron and steel and these other conventional industries, how they can compete against other countries. I mean, whoever will stay, whoever will leave, I mean, at least to make it survive. And secondly, or B, maybe more importantly, if you would ask me, they need to rethink the future technologies from the perspective of being able to compete against China and the US, which has swiftly entered into the markets for solar, hydrogen technologies, wind, and the others. So these are the 2 aspects that the industrial components will need to decide. Whoever will survive, I mean, it's impossible for everyone to survive, obviously, because, you know, the costs are so high that it will not be possible for everyone to survive. And if we are going to speak about new industries for the future technologies, we need to rethink how Europe will be able to use or utilize its comparative advantages for the future. So therefore, the new Commission will need to make a new industrial master plan. Maybe the last thing that I can emphasize, and particularly for Turkey, and then we'll move on to the questions part. I think European Union, or the coming Commission, will need to rethink about its trade policies as well. I mean, they need to make significant changes in their policies, one of which, as we talked the previous time, is the carbon tax. They need to, I mean, a bit just also fix on their screws. I mean, because unless they use their own industry, they may be facing severe problems in this respect as well. The point that I'm trying to make is in the European Union, as of next year, there will be a new maybe level that will be started. I think it's going to be relevant for Turkey to appreciate our significant trade partner. Well, I've tried to give you a bit of look into international markets, particularly for EU, and would like to thank you for your attention. And I would like to welcome questions from the audience, if any. And one hand is up there, so it's a privilege to have you with us, sir. Thank you very much for being with us, and all the information you've given us also matter. My name is James Gökmen. I'm the editor in Echo Publications. There is an anti-dumping, would you expect any kind of measure to be taken by the European side in this respect against China? Let's take the other questions, and then I will answer all of them together. Thank you very much, sir, and it's a privilege to have you here. From Turek Sustainability Center, my name is Şafak Özsoy. Starting off with the last question or the matter, you've advised Europe to make a new master plan. Do you think it applies to Turkey as well? Because we are trying to run our sector with the master plan of the 18th century. We're speaking about sustainable development. Environment has always been an aspect. And if we're speaking about a balanced decision-making process, of course, when we support sustainability with energy, wastes are all important, maybe the most important thing above all. And then experience, and Turkey is lacking that experience. In this conference, I mean, do you think that we can also share opinions about the nuclear? And it's a factor that 30 years ago, it was 30% of utilizing nuclear power in Europe, and there is a trend for increasing the share. Together with natural gas, LNG is going to enter the market. Do you think that is there any possibility for the nuclear decisions to be changed with the role of LNG?
Çok teşekkür ederiz. Çok güzel.
Thank you very much for the illuminating and very well-explained talk. I will have two questions. The first one is, by 2026, for the carbon border tax, what are the preparations for Turkey? Do you have any idea? The government is preparing to that, but the private sector, I think, is to undertake some responsibilities. Is there a collaboration between the private and the public sector in Turkey for that? Secondly, with a big capacity entering the market, the LNG with a high capacity and with low prices, do you think we should be expecting something negative about the renewables? Do you think LNG will again become a competitor versus renewables? Two more questions, and then thank you, Dr. Birol, for being here with us. My name is Fatih Güçlü. I am the Secretary General for Green Hydrogen Producers Association. You said the new bright star of the energy sector is renewables, and green hydrogen is what we are advocating. The process started with the EU with green power, I think, has been relevant. Considering the current deficit in our economy and the energy supply security, as well as integration with the EU, how would you position green hydrogen, and how would you assess the situation for green hydrogen? And then last question, so we'll finish up with this last question. Thank you for your visionary talk. I will have two brief questions. The first one is also as a continuum of the previous question. This time I'm going to ask about the development of fusion energy. Can you just, with a few sentences, explain how it's going? Do you think it will be commercialized? Secondly, what do you think about developments in the slowdown of the electrical vehicles? A 10% stagnation reported by the European Union. This has narrowed down the market in Europe. Do you think it's temporary and it's going to change, or what would be your perspective? Thank you. Well, I've just listed down the questions and I will try and give you my opinion on each and every one of them, and then we'll have a second round of questions and then we'll finish off. Well, do you think EU can make anti-dumping measures? There are the rules of the World Trade Organization. Maybe you know it, the People's Republic of China have raised a complaint for European Union, for giving barriers to China in trade. And for many years, China has itself made this quite evident, and there have been significant levels of dumping. And it's really interesting that they are making this complaint against Europe now. But the point I'd like to make here is in early 2025, we'll have a publication on this. Clean energy technologies and trade policies will intermingle more than ever by 2025, so much that it will be quite a blurred line to decide who is right or who is wrong. I mean, it's going to be quite debatable to decide who is right and who is wrong. And both the EU and the United States and probably other major Asian countries, neighboring China probably, will be in the position of looking into solar electrical vehicles against Chinese major domination. I mean, all these parties will be in the position of re-looking into their industry, into their economies, for developing some commercial policies as how they can be stronger again in these sectors that can go into the direction that you're just emphasizing. The second question is about Turkey. Well, Turkey, meaning, of course, Turkey and many other countries together with Turkey. We need to see now that tomorrow's industry sector will be based on clean energy technologies manufacturing industry. What I mean is, in 2-3 decades from now, we will be speaking about, only industries that will be able to produce with clean energy technologies. Therefore, considering the interests of our country, I think Turkey and other countries will need to reconsider as to how they can invest in clean energy technologies. Not all of them we can compete, but in some of them we do have a strong hand. So we do have a competitive advantage in some of these industries. One, I think, being wind turbines technology, and some others. Green hydrogen, that I will come in a minute. Whichever Turkey can compete in, in terms of the supply chain, where our position will be in providing the contributions, we need to make a good analysis, and then we need to provide a direct supply to these sectors. I think the policies will follow should basically be based on that. I'm putting it into this direction. People just argue, is it going to be Turkey to save the world from global climate change? No, of course not. But I mean, if you would leave Turkey aside, globally we're going into that direction. But as Turkey, we need to take position there as well. And there was also a question about the nuclear power, but I'm not supporting anything but Galatasaray. So I'm not a fan of nuclear power. I'm standing also in a distance to all of these energy technologies, but it's a fact that nuclear is growing, yet with some problems. One is financing. I mean, the fund problem is really major. If you're going to build a nuclear facility, you need to make a major initial investment at the level of trillions, which I think cannot be done but by every country. I mean, the countries that are not in the liberal economy will be challenged, of course, to make this initial investment. And second problem is the waste problem, as you have rightfully mentioned, but it has not been fully resolved. But many countries are just taking care of it. I mean, dealing with this problem in a way. And Ayşe Hanım also referred to the problem of the issue of LNG. LNG, it's going to come in abundance, and the prices for LNG will put a downward pressure, which I think is going to change the game, not only for nuclear power and for renewables, especially in some places of the world. But many countries are now considering nuclear power not only as energy, but beyond that, any country that will be in the position of a nuclear power will have a way in the global balances. That's how they are considering it. And there was another question. The carbon border tax, how Turkey will be prepared for it. You would know it better than I do, but last December, I've been with Mr. Mehmet Şimşek in Ankara, and the sectoral opinion leaders. We made a meeting together. Turkey has been working on it, but the only thing I can say is, if you go to Brussels, you would see many Chinese or other, Indian, for instance, entrepreneurs visiting and negotiating with the EU what kind of flexibilities can be provided in which items. So they are taking active role there. And the players in the private sector. And I've had the chance to discuss this with our private sector representatives, but they're aware of it. But awareness is one thing, but implementation is another. This is our game plan that we need. But if you would ask me if there is any game plan I've seen, I cannot say I have seen a major game plan there. I think it's a very urgent thing. It's a burning thing that we need to make. I mean, Europe or the European Union has kept mentioning it, and they will not forget about it. And the politicians who are pushing it are not just the decision makers there, but at the same time, the industry sector, just to protect itself, they're also pushing in this direction. Another question was about emissions. Will it reduce emissions or increase emissions if LNG comes in abundance? But there are some places, of course, that the emissions will be reduced if we can replace coal. But if the life for renewables is to be challenged, I think emissions are likely to increase. But overall, I'm speaking about I don't think that the evolution of renewables is something stoppable. particularly because of the cost benefit. And another thing is to import energy. Any country cannot start from scratch. You need energy terminals, infrastructure, which will take time. And probably the countries will say, LNG wave, will it be temporary or will it continue in years? You need to make an enormous investment, particularly in countries in Asia. So it's a decision to be made. Green hydrogen, I think it's a really important option, particularly for Turkey. Now that renewables is going on with a very high potential, with a very low production cost, I think it's going to be an option for Turkey. But as I say, it's not enough. We have a potential, but as in other countries, we need concrete steps to be taken in this direction. In many countries, the problem is that production costs are quite good and there is a high potential, but who will be the buyers? What is going to be the demand? So we need to make demand, create demand, and for that we need to make some regulations. And the very last question is about fusion energy, as asked. Together with the general interest in nuclear power, there is also an interest and appetite for fusion, particularly in America, in Italy, and in many other countries of Europe. New investors are just looking into fusion, but I wouldn't expect a major change in the short run. Electrical vehicles, well, the thing that I need to say is on Tuesday, on Tuesday, that I will be announcing the new figures for electrical vehicles in the world. In Europe, there has been a shake. Yes, that's true, but this vibration is because of the end of the subsidy programs in some countries. That's the reason why there's obviously weakening in support, but 60% of the electrical cars are sold in China all alone, so China matters. And 1 out of every 2 cars sold in China is electrical vehicles in China now. And electrical vehicles are now at the level of competing with the combustion engine vehicles from the cost perspective. And China is the major exporter, as I've said in the previous meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Probably in many cities of the world, we will be seeing the Chinese electrical vehicles, and don't be surprised for that. And this has been the situation even now in some countries. So the electrical vehicles are coming strong and fast. There may be, zigzags and policy changes from time to time in some countries, but the trend is quite obvious also for Turkey, both for manufacturing, exports, imports, and infrastructure. I think it's important not to lag behind the trends. I think we have consumed our time. Maybe 2 more questions, and then I will leave the floor to the panel. Yes, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. As always, it's been quite valuable. I'm from the Turkish Wind Energy Association, the president. I would like you to, detail one thing. In clean energy technologies, countries should make a prioritization. And you said that wind may be a preference for Turkey there. What is your basis for this suggestion? Globalization has been the main issue in our youth times. And this has left its position to regionalization and nationalization. The 3 major economic powers, China, EU, and America are trying to keep up their own domains. Probably they will be taking some measures for that. Some will make some rearrangements on customs, and some will concentrate on carbon emissions. But these countries are not the entire world. They're independent regions, such as Russia fighting Ukraine, Central Asia, Africa, South America, and these are all economic fight zones. These trade fights, whatever you name them as, will maybe continue in their own protections, but there will be implications on other regions of the world. How would you suggest, can you update us about the country policies for that? Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. I had the privilege of listening to you several times, and today we have the opportunity of listening to you some international updates. I am the executive director of IICEC. Well, I know that in energy efficiency is a matter that also you emphasize very much. I would like to ask you your latest opinion on energy efficiency, particularly in areas where energy is intensively used, like the buildings. I would like to give you an example. 20-30 billion US dollar worth of an energy used in buildings is used in cooling and heating by 80%, and the half year wasting, pricing up to 12-13 billion US dollars. With the TL, it's 400 billion TL that we are wasting every year without utilizing. And of course, in other domains, such as in energy, in industry, and energy efficiency in agriculture, transport, so on and so forth, energy efficiency all matter. And this is the area that I'm quite familiar with. 12 billion US dollars wasted in Turkey. What would you think about this perspective? Thank you. No more questions will be welcome, I'm afraid to say. And then I will pass on to the panel. Well, essentially, energy efficiency. Let me start with the last question, because your point is quite relevant. It's really important to me. And energy efficiency, to me, is the number one. Number one is fuels, and then oil, and then energy efficiency should be a priority. Some countries do have solar potential, some oil potential, some wind potential, but everyone would have an energy efficiency potential all alone. And there, I think it is a matter to be considered as a priority in industry, in transportation, and maybe most importantly in buildings, as you say rightfully, with the mere reason that for one building, we can speak about a livelihood of 50 years. It will have a lifespan of 50 years. Once you build a facility or a building, you will have to survive with it minimum for 50 years. And one point that is quite striking is 80% of the buildings being constructed in the world, unfortunately, are not subject to any significant energy efficiency regulation. In Latin America, Africa, or Asia, wherever that might be, they will stand there for 50, 60 years and will constitute to be a problem in wasting energy, particularly for heating and cooling. Therefore, energy efficiency is extremely important for the environment, for energy, and for energy efficiency itself. Therefore, you would remember the COP28 meeting in Dubai, where we advised 5 conditions. One of them was about energy efficiency. We advised all the countries of the world to bring up their energy efficiency capacity twice higher. Particularly for Turkey, I would like to say that We do have an international action plan for energy efficiency, but looking into various sectors and comparing it versus other countries, I mean, especially we need to criticize ourselves compared to neighboring countries. And I mean, if you want to compare ourselves with the European Union, there is still a long way to go. And for that, of course, energy efficiency improvement should be a priority, not only in the regulatory aspect, but also in the energy prices aspect. As for wind, why have I mentioned wind? Well, it is quite challenging for us to enter in other markets for renewables. And we can now penetrate into the wind sector because the market allows for new players to come. Secondly, we have accumulated experience in wind turbine manufacturing. And thirdly, we can now just use our experiences in the automobile manufacturing industry. And the fourth one is probably Europe is trying to overcome its dependence to China in this aspect, and trying to do that, it will not limit itself with its own territory, but will be in the position of developing some projects with the neighboring countries of EU. Therefore, Turkey may be in an advantageous position. But again, it's good to have an advantage, but it's something else to implement it. The last question is, except for these three main regions, India and some other countries, some other regions, what will happen there? There will be an incredible fight for markets there in the other regions of the world. As an example, and in link with this question, for the electrical vehicles, who will dominate these markets? I mean, it's a huge and enormous fight, I don't know, I mean, challenge or competition may be the right word for it. This competition will accelerate mainly in two regions, if you would ask me, developing Asia and South America. Africa is now lagging behind. I think it's really an important continent, but yet it's going to have a way to go. But three economic powers plus India must also be considered in terms of market share in these regions, and they've been working quite hard in this direction, with some commercial conflicts going on as well. And the last word is, we need to rethink. I mean, we always say energy is always interlinked with geopolitics, as we see every other day. But one more thing is, energy plus foreign trade looks to be intermingled with each other more and more every other day. And now the time is for the panel.
Fatih Bey,
Thank you very much, Fatih Birol, for honoring the IICEC conference. Thank you very much, Fatih Birol, from International Energy Agency. Now I'd like to invite the first row, the protocol members, to take the family photo all together.
Ahmet Erdem.
Ahmet Erdem, Shell Turkey country manager, will be moderating the panel. We will have Nursel Ölmez Ateş from Brosan Holding, Human Communications and Sustainability Group head Ebru Dildar Edin, and the head of the Executive Committee of Business World and Sustainable Development Society, Filiz Gökler, Turkey Country Director Baker Hughes, and Mehtap Anık Zorbozan from IICEC, the independent member of the Executive Committee. Will you please be seated?
Shell Türkiye Ülke Başkanı
So I would like to give the floor to Ahmet Erdem, Shell Turkey Country Head. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Fatih Birol, as it has always been quite an enlightening, informative, reflective presentation, providing us information about the recent developments and all the consequences. I totally agree with him. Geopolitics and energy maybe will diverge from each other in the course of time together with renewables, but I have no doubt that they are interconnected and will continue to affect the business life. So, in this very distinguished panel, and we actually will try to further grow the seats again provided by Fatih Birol in our different way of thinking. Well, very experienced, very competent for businesswoman. It is for the first time ever in my life that I am moderating such a session. Thank you very much, of course, for those who contributed to this idea, and of course to the panelists for accepting the invitation. I'm more than proud. Of course, the business world, geopolitics, the effects on supply chain, the development and energy security, climate issue, decarbonization. I can actually have an exhaustive list. It's quite a wide spectrum, and we are facing new trends, challenges, and opportunities, and as the entire business world. And these are the developments that are quite interactive with each other. Their economic, social, and environmental implications as well. It's a must to think about a sustainable future, to plan it, to build it. There are new opportunities during this era, and we should not miss them because they may not be possible again. Energy, I would say, is very important for economic growth and social development as well, and will continue to be so. You know, energy is vital, and both in terms of our lives and economy. About net zero and about decarbonization, thinking about them all, sustainable energy solutions are very important for the future. But of course, as we keep saying it, and as we totally believe in this, all stakeholders should be working together. It's only possible by this way. Neither energy industry nor governments or the decision makers or the consumers would do it all alone. We can only possibly make it if we act all together at the same time. So, in terms of the business world and energy, the future of sustainable energy, the required resources, technology, innovation, financing, so many different critical factors that we will discuss. Then we also will try to discuss about the new ideas that will help us for the future in our panel. So, the very first question would go to Ebru. It's actually against the way that we sit down on the panel, but you know, WBTS Turkey, you are from the Sustainable Development Society, and you've been actually the president while the society was so successful, and you actually speak about corporate sustainability. In performing business activities, you have to consider the social, ethical, economic, environmental, cultural aspects of this. This is such a definition. So, Ebru, in sustainable development, you have vast experience. So, based on this, about profitability of the companies and sustainable energy, how it is possible to have a tiny fine-tuned balance in between the two. So, what do you think about this? Yes, I'd be more than happy to answer. First of all, thank you very much, IICEC, for organizing such a panel and the entire members of the Executive Committee. As women, we've been together at several different issues, but it's most about women issues, so it's great to have such a team in energy. And I hope that, just like in the energy industry, again, women will actually take more roles in the boards of directors. And there will be some time, so I would like to underline it, taking this occasion and having all the representatives of the energy industry here. Sustainability, once we said sustainability, and the energy industry is quite the topic, and hot topic. About more than 75% of the energy, the carbon emissions, is coming from the energy industry. One saying energy industry is generation, the industry itself, transportation, the energy used for that, heating. And considering them all, I would say energy is the most critical factor among all. Sustainability, social, environmental, governance, and so on, looking at one pillar only, unfortunately, we could not reach to the target that we have. Back to profitability, as you all know, Milton Friedman, economist, said the only goal of companies is profitability. But we have the new world order. So the sole goal of companies is not only profitability, and better to say, we're just lucky that it is not profitability. And it is then responsible not only for the value that they put on their equity, but for the society, for the employees, and all. They have to create value on those too. Therefore, in all the actions taken by the companies, it's not only environmental factors like wastewater, energy use, the resources used, materials, and so on. There are some environmental components of this, but before that, the value on the employees, equal treatment to employees, the value given to their people, development of the customers, the development of their habitat, the environment, the ecosystem. So it's all about the value that they give to all stakeholders. So sustainability, yes, you are right. At the exit point of sustainability, it has always started as nice to have initially. But of course, it's a must right now. It's even actually a fight for existentialism. This is very critical. Why? Because if you today do not do the things that you have to do for tomorrow, and if you do not plan for the upcoming 2 to 3 decades, then you cannot survive. And that's the reason why it's not profitability. It's about total assets, total added value. And it's not today, not a decade or 2 decades ahead, also even 5 decades, 50 years ahead that we should think about. So, and about COP28, Mr. Bro already mentioned, and looking at the last couple of years, since Paris Climate Conference, I would say quite an important event and a very major conference. And when I underlined the most when I joined that conference, the perception that I have is that the installed capacity, in particular in renewable energy, by 2030 would be tripled. And the other thing is that, as Mr. Bros stated, about energy efficiency and doubling the rate of energy efficiency. Extremely important for the countries. Great commitment. 122 countries, if I'm not mistaken, they were signatory parties, and I wish Turkey actually was one of the signatory parties. But Our distinguished minister at the same time mentioned about 100 million emission reduction in terms of Turkey, but this is actually like 3.6% annually, such a reduction, which I would say, considering net zero by 2050 of the countries, it is actually pretty under it. So what do we need for this? I think it's very important for the companies to do something about it on their own if they really would like to survive. And they actually have to be much more aggressive to survive. We are just at such an era. And the second point to draw from there, which we'll be discussing a lot, technology and innovation. With technology and innovation, many steps taken so far or the investments made so far would be made much easier. Even this is the case for the time being. Of course, we have actually a long way to go, more steps to be taken, but once we get the correct data, analyze them, and offer good solutions, and the more investments made, and it will contribute to the profitability and sustainability of the corporates. And lastly, now it is the time for the countries to compete with each other and try to have a larger piece of the cake. And therefore, Turkey at the same time, in such a competitive environment, should take the necessary steps in energy use and industry. And therefore, Turkey should actually act faster. Why? Looking at the other developing countries, we are disadvantaged. Why? Because we have limited resources, which I will link to circular economy. Circular economy is all about output of one company being the input of another and do production accordingly, so actually drop down the resource cost. And we actually had some works with the ministry, which will be announced later. It is 4.5 to 5%, the circular economy share of Turkey. And on the way to zero carbon, it must be 17%. In countries like Netherlands, it is 25, 30%. So, circularity, if you're asking me, I think we just need more concrete steps to be taken and try to identify different industries. And just like, for example, as the countries, we set some goals and try to identify what we should do, just like, for example, the midterm goals, and at the same time reevaluate ourselves and revise our goals. Exactly, Turkey at the same time should have a consolidated approach and make a plan. And last but not least, I don't know, maybe it's not the best place to speak about this, but if you're asking me about climate, Turkey actually should have a total different perspective about climate. I don't know, maybe should have a separate ministry to go through this transformation. We're even late for this. Thank you. I would like to thank you, Ebru Edin. We've been expecting the report that you mentioned about circularity. I'm sure that we will have a lot to learn. Maybe there are too many different opportunities, but probably there will be a roadmap which will guide us. So, Nursel Ateş, Borusan Holding, of course, you have different experiences at different actual business lines. So, based on this, from the regulatory framework, technological development, mobilization of the investments, and in terms of the market dynamics, what would you say in terms of sustainable energy? What is the biggest challenge in terms of the business world? So, well, thank you for the organization of this panel. I would like to thank to IICEC and at the same time Fatih Birol for providing us information. So I will go from where actually Ebru left so as to avoid any repetition. It is about managing today and tomorrow. That's the challenge that we have as the private sector right now. And from this perspective, I would say we're just going through wars, crises, and too many different factors affecting our lives, but also we have to think about the future of our planet, to plan for the future, in particular global warming. It's actually a must that we should have such an energy transition. Looking at this energy transition, we have a couple of challenges, which I will just drop down to 5. One about the regulatory framework. And it's actually a big topic. There are so many new regulations introduced day by day. Energy Efficiency Directive, the Green Deal, and so on. So many different regulations that we are just subject to. They are good, guiding for the private industry what they have to do about energy transition, but also it's a framework that we have to comply with. And not only EU and the world, but at the same time in Turkey, we have national energy plan, renewables share going up to 35%, which is so important. And this actually helps the private industry where to fit and comply with. I think one important topic we should not ignore is the targets are also dynamic. Why? Because regulations are changing, new regulations are coming, and therefore there is the need for people who will follow these regulations, do the impact analysis. It's a must for all companies, and therefore it's a dynamic, and regulation is both a risk and an opportunity. It's a risk because you have to comply with it, and it's an opportunity. Why? Because the more that you do and act according to the regulations and the more actions that you take to comply with the regulations, it could be an opportunity. The other thing is the legislation itself. There's actually a tsunami of legislations, as we keep saying, and it's important to catch up with those. Another thing is the need for renewables. If you're just going to do an energy transition from renewables, wind, solar, hydroelectricity, and so on, that we are planning to use. And from this perspective, I would say, I think it's very important. There are so many different systems, production, generation systems, logistics, transportation. So many industries are undergoing a transformation right now. And there are important technological developments, cost reduction, in particular, actually pushing the private industry for renewables. And therefore, it's an important transition. And as Borusan Group, it's 30% of the energy that we use, even more, based on renewables. And in the EU again, to 27% by 2023 of the EU from renewables, wind and solar. So I think these are some messages that we should draw some lesson. As Mr. Birol stated, Turkey has the potential in wind, in the solar energy. And therefore, with some concrete actions taken and setting some goals, and maybe with some incentives and subsidies, I guess, Turkey actually can be a regional hub in terms of renewables. That's what we can do. And of course, it is not only at the public that we should do, but the private industry at the same time should encourage and use the potential of renewables for self-consumption. Looking at the legislation today and trying to encourage actually the industrial facilities to have self-consumption with the energy that they generate. So we'll have less dependency on the fossil fuels, and we'll actually have a healthy transformation to the green energy. Of course, there is the need for infrastructure, strengthen the grid. You have to invest on this. A third title I would like to say, as you all know, once we start monitoring our measures, as you all know, for energy transformation, a total energy transformation in particular, you actually have to transform the ecosystem, your value chain, and both the upstream and at the downstream, you should actually have less emissions. And therefore, in the industry, it's not only about using your own perspective, but over the entire supplier chain, you should have a strategy to reduce emissions. An example from our group, Borusan Group, 85% of the emissions of Borusan Group by two major industrial lines, as Bor Çelik, the steel, and the pipe Borusan. This 85 is actually corresponding to only 5% of them. In the steel and iron, for example, it's actually quite emission intensive. So the less, it doesn't matter how less our emissions are in the entire supplier chain, it's just in 5% that it affects. And therefore, it is not only the scope 1, but also we need to develop some strategies for scope 2 and 3 as well. So in 2023, we have a sustainable purchasing policy that we publish, and we also convey to all our suppliers. Last year was very critical in terms of the critical emissions, and 100 critical suppliers that we identify having most of the emissions, and we asked them to make a self-assessment and the ESG performance, trying to understand the ESG performance of our suppliers. And because once this is the case, it will be very helpful for us for the upcoming supplier chain and system as well. So in this transformation of the ecosystem, I think it's very important to focus on the emissions of the entire chain. So technological development is another part of my discussion, which will be discussed later throughout the panel, but in particular the solar panels, the wind turbines, there is actually more efficiency, green hydrogen, batteries, and the private industry should actually have capability over this. They have to integrate it in their own business models. There could be some new opportunities for investment in new areas, just like, for example, for holdings like us. And so these are actually new investment areas. And therefore, we have to understand technology and make the necessary investments in a timely manner, and which is actually an area of opportunity for the private industry. But of course, considering that it's a challenge because there's not much competencies on this. Of course, in doing all these investments for energy efficiency, for transition to the green energy and so on, we need investments. And for investments, we need to find funds. And to find funds, maybe the most important thing is the reporting standards. Especially in the past, it's important to have sound reporting in the past, being transparent, accountable for your performance that you realize and cannot realize, reporting it, and even taking this under guarantee, having the credit rating or the rating institutions to do so, which will be very useful for having access to funds. And it's actually a major barrier in front of our investments. But of course, I think what the corporates should do is to have a healthy and sound and reliable reporting system. And as Borusan Group, we will have the integrated activity report for the third time in a year. And just like we did in the past, the very first integrated activity reporting that we did for the first time in Turkey, both financial and non-financial performances already announced. So from this perspective, I would say access to finance is much easier, both nationally and internationally. So I went through 5 different topics. We have both the risks and the opportunities for this. And therefore, each and every company should better analyze it. They actually have to better do it and take actions. Could be some good opportunities for them to have a better growth. And so just these challenges these are important challenges for each and every one of us, and we should actually continue to learn from each other. Thank you very much, Nursel. just very well going through the challenges. Of course, we should work hand in hand to go through them, and the decision makers and the authorities at the same time should observe all these challenges and enact regulations accordingly. Now I will move to Filiz Gökler. Of course, you are just acting in a wide geography, both in energy and finance, like the solutions that you offer, and you can offer technology as well for this. But I actually try to make it as brief as possible, not possible to fit all your activities in one sentences. But in terms of sustainable energy and the climate change, about reducing carbon footprint, what are the sustainability strategies that you would like to advise to us for the business world? Thank you.
Konuya giriş yapmadan önce
Before the introduction, would like to thank IICEC for this year's event, and it's been a long time since I last listened to Dr. Birol, and it's again been another privilege. As for women panelists, and it's a privilege for me to be one of them, and because at the same time I am a member of the board of Women in Industry Association.
ve yer almaları gerekiyor.
We are willing to see women in different sectors more intensively, and we have been running activities in this respect quite intensively. But women without men is not possible. Therefore, as much as I can see, although we are for women on stage, it is a balanced distribution between the two genders. In the audience, would like to thank everyone to spend time for this. Would like to ask our male colleagues to support younger women in this direction. It's really very hard without your support if we want to have more women in all sectors. Well, coming back to sustainability, as Nursel Hanım said, there are still many things we can learn from each other. Although Baker and Hughes relatively function in oil and energy, it's not very well known and recognized in Turkey. And ours is an energy technology company. Of course, our sustainable strategy is based on energy, inevitably. As BH, in our sustainability strategy, we are taking some actions under two main headlines. The first one is to save the day, because there are still many things we can do for the day. And secondly, as Fatih Bey said, to invest for the future. Saving today means, as well said by the previous speakers, we are aiming at reducing our carbon footprint, our operational footprint significantly. Therefore, Scope 1 and 2 emissions must be reduced by operational actions. Particularly in 2019, Baker made a public commitment stating that by 2030 they will reduce Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% and Scope 3 emissions by 2030, and by 2050 net zero target will have been reached. So we have been a leader in making this commitment publicly. With this commitment made in Scope 1 and 2 emissions that we are burning and causing emissions, we have achieved a 28% reduction so far, which is a big success. Yes, we do have action plans, and as a country, we are making action plans as well, but it is really important to make an implementation. I have to say that as BH, we are following a very successful policy. You would appreciate that Scope 3 is a bit more difficult because it's not only about us as Baker Hughes, but also it's relevant to our suppliers, logistics of the suppliers, supply and travel expenses and travel situation of our employees. So we're actions in this respect quite comprehensively. This is really a broader and more difficult area, but I'm sure that within 5 countries ahead, we'll make a good benchmarking with the other companies, and we'll take a more concrete distance in that direction as well.
Bakayım, evet. İkinci başlık altında
My second point is to invest in the future. Future meaning new generation technologies, carbon capture, storage. Particularly in Turkey, in the last 8 years, solar and geothermal have been quite active. Investing into new and clean energy resources has been a second priority for Baker Hughes. Our investment is going on not only in Turkey but also in the global scale. We've been delivering successful projects with our partners. Also, this is a sustainability strategy serving for the UN sustainability targets. You may find detailed information on that in our website. Next to corporate sustainability, individual sustainability also matters. Corporate company, we have been collaborating with 55,000 employees in 120 countries. Therefore, awareness of individuals in sustainability strategies is really important. We have the Exit from Carbon program started. It means not only the company itself, but every individual, every one of 55,000 employees should be aware through trainings, example cases, and practices, should learn and share with N+1, 2, 3 people so that they will implement carbon-free case examples in their own personal life. We have a credits site that is working in this company, and it's probably going to be a role model for other companies. It's going as a very successful model. I'm sure that in other corporate companies there are comparable works going on. What are the main practices within the framework of the strategy? Energy efficiency is our inevitable direction, not only in renewables but also in oil and gas. Particularly after the pandemics, many companies were obliged to get into process changes. Fleet management, more modern and economic accessible production facilities are all parts of our sustainability projects. In addition to that, of course, one more thing I'd like to mention, because when you look at the website of many companies, sustainability strategy, green energy, mission and visions are stated. But there is a big question mark as to how it's being implemented in real life. International institutes, their criteria have been our guidance in preparing sustainability reports. These are really vital for our purposes. Our sustainability strategy report has been prepared based on the criteria of 4 institutes: Global Reporting Initiative, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, climate fiscal statements for workforce, and Standard Board for Sustainability. It's not only a report prepared by Baker, but at the same time prepared by the entire company with the support of 4-5 international institutes. So this is about a sustainability strategy implemented in this respect. Hopefully, this is going to be activated in our counterparts. Thank you very much, Filiz Gökler. Mehtap Anık-Zorboza will be our next panelist. Well, making an introduction, I emphasize on the future social, economic, and business relevance of energy, but I'm sure that there are things you'd like to add to this statement about the role of clean energy, particularly in all these dimensions. But from the perspective of an energy company, what do you think should be the role of an actor in sustainable energy market? What should be the role of energy companies in this market? I would like to start by expressing our appreciation to IICEC and Dr. Birol for his contribution. I will be making reference to your statement, your talk during actually the points that I will be going through. And the report of the agency is really very relevant and quite valuable for our purpose. The future of energy depends on renewables, energy efficiency, and sustainable energy technologies, and the increasing interest in these technologies. In this respect, of course, 5Ds are important energy trends. The main issues are just defined according to these five main trends: decarbonization, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. How can we just make it more extensive? Digitalization is the other day. Which digital platforms or solutions can be used in transformation as sustainable business models? Decentralization, potential decentralized energy models, how they can be managed and how efficiency can be improved here. Democratization actually is about the acceptance of the costs to be created by the new models. This is actually the Yellow Vests problems that existed in France, for instance, about the acceptance of these costs. Once they emerged, how can we strengthen participation, deregulation, and diversification? According to national legislations, how can we consider liberalization as a part of the process? And for their purposes, diversification it will be a matter to be considered on the basis of the business models that will be diversified, flexible energy production, demand-based production, storage, and grid problems will also be discussed in this respect. Well, as this energy transformation takes place, there will be destructive changes in all the rings of the chain. This value chain can be summarized as production, grids, retail, sales and marketing, and final or end user. Each and every one of these players should undergo some destructive and major questions will need to be answered in these levels as well, like on the manufacturing or the production level, integration of renewable energies and their imbalances and their control of these imbalances on the grid. Prosumers, and meaning producing consumers, redispatching measures on the grid side, smart grids, system services, and asset management. On the retail side, production and pricing systems, industrial electricity prices, energy trade-off systems, and portfolio management. And on the marketing and sales side, variable tariffs, self-service portals, electromobility, heat pumps, as explained by one of the audience in this respect. From the boiler technology, there's a switch to heat pump technology in Europe now. And this kind of a product flexibility should be the point of research as well. In the end user side, smart homes, consumer big data, full-time or the real-time data utilization, service provider, distribution companies providing a swift time for the customer transformation. Changing heat regulations and laws should be the priorities in these domains as well. Energy transformation, yes, is a critical aspect of climate change measures, but at the same time has a big potential for energy economics as well. So from this corner, everyone may look into that. What will be there for me? the energy be having a big role in development will have implications in all the domains of our lives, in the entire industry, manufacturing, and all the aspects of the process. Here, renewable energy resources, how they are developed, and how energy efficiency will be achieved should be considered as triggers for economic growth, with the potential of creating employment and contributing to environmental sustainability. To me, what should be in the future, I think, can be summarized within the report of the World Energy Council. Since 2021, the reports are being updated based on 3 scenarios in the analysis. It's not only the temperatures that are taken as the basis for the climate change, but also what expected changes will be there in the essential industries, with attached risks, social, geopolitical risks assessed as well. As we all follow, the scenarios are basically about steps. Stated policies scenario. And the other one is, by the way, this one is currently discussed from the perspective of industrial policies, climate, including the latest defined policies. And then the temperature for the steps is 1.5. By 2030, it will reach 5 additional 3 points. Announced Plex scenario, APS, is the next announced complex scenario, is about all announced climate and energy targets of countries fulfilled timely and fully. Here, by 2100, we are going to expect 2.7 centigrades of an increased temperature. The third scenario is about the net zero emissions, that the temperature increase will be limited by 1.5 centigrades. This is built from top to bottom. This target that was stated initially was recalculated on the basis of years. So in the last 2 years, the way that was taken in this direction was analyzed with the perspective of the gap. Reading net zero emissions, the target for 2050, I remembered the film Don't Look Up. It looks the same way to me, because by 2030, the targets are set quite well, but there are so many things that will need to be completed that there will be an extreme work to be completed in the last 5 to 10 years, where our lives will have to be changed radically. There are signs that would warn us about the expected changes in the last few years. So, in average, 2.6 centigrades of an increase will be expected, and population will go up to 9.7 billion people. Maybe the most critical player there is China, as Dr. Birol rightfully emphasized. Why so? Firstly, population-wise. Also, in terms of the GDP, it plays a very critical role. It's a critical supplier, and at the same time, it's a critical mineral owner. Therefore, in terms of the critical minerals, China is quite important. In all scenarios, the pace of growth for the Chinese economy seems to be the most determinant factor. There was some time that I worked for the oil and gas industry for Borusan, and we visited Permil Base and had the chance of seeing the pipelines there. personally. In this respect, I understand how the big investment there lies, how the integrated order I have seen. It felt impossible to me to have such a huge transformation in such a big pace. The report discusses that by 2030, in all the fossil fuel types, we will go up to the peak, and then there will be an expected decline. As Fatih Bey said, this will take place between 2025 to 2030. Of course, coal seems to go through the fastest decline in the carbon release fossil fuels, but yet because of energy security problems, the need for investing in oil or other energy means cannot be totally abundant. For many years, 80% of our energy need is supplied by the fossil three solutions. If it goes in the same direction, we will regress down to only 73%, which is not a major change. But to reach the net zero target, we need to make more than 5 times of an investment for the energy transactions. Net zero requires that emissions are reduced by more than 80% by 2030. What can contribute to that? Renewable energy resources being tripled, energy efficiency activities doubled, reaching up to 4% annually, increase of electrification, and fossil fuel operations, and the methane gas emissions being reduced in this respect. I mean, considering the matter from the corner of energy security, there are other risk factors, such as extreme weather conditions are quite a big threat for energy security. And at the same time, clean energy projects are facing cost inflation in some markets. There are some stagnations for the supply chain that we had to go through during the pandemics, particularly in the period to come. China, especially in critical minerals, is expected to face major problems as a supplier identity. More than 85% of the solar panels achieved by China leads to a potential stagnation, supplier stagnation. And at the same time, high borrowing costs are just exposing us to different challenges. Also, essentially, China, in shaping up the energy trends, has a big part to play, but China is also changing in itself. And although not at the level of income as developed countries, I mean, maybe at the level of $30,000 to $40,000 per capita GDP, China only has $15% now. Therefore, compared to other developing countries, it has a differentiated role. Cement still are the sectors where the demand will be loosening in the future to come. And it means that our energy demand will be diminishing globally. So as to reach the targets, both regulations, policies, and/or clean energy supplies and quality or qualified staff or financial accessibility, we need to take from an integrated perspective for all the risks to be attached.
Teşekkür ediyoruz.
Thank you. Back to Nursel Ateş. As you have also mentioned, as Borusan, you're actually managing a huge portfolio, including energy. But of course, you have different business lines, and my question is about that. For sustainability trends, how you are integrating to such a wide range of a portfolio? How do you manage? As I told you previously about risks and opportunities, by closely following both risks and the opportunities. But of course, in huge corporates like us, governance is so important, how you're going to follow it, because we have several different companies acting at different geographies, and we have different production processes in 3 different continents, at 11 different countries we are operating. So it's quite actually a huge geography, and sustainability is not only we're doing in Turkey, also at the global scale in our businesses and the States, and in several other regions of the world we're doing it. Of course, you have to set targets, first of all, for energy transition in particular. Complying with the Green Deal is important. We have a team group on this, also for decarbonization. We have an expert leading the group, and our colleagues from different companies under the holding are joining us, trying to create a synergy. As mentioned in COP28, we'd like to transform our energy to the green side and doing investments as such and increase energy efficiency. So with regards to these two, maybe very briefly about our practices as time allows. I think the most important of all is Enes is here with us. We have again Borusan MBV. It's an important know-how. Borçelik, Borusan Pipeline, because these are the projects, and it is together with Borusan EBV Energy that we're doing it. And EBV Energy, for the time being, has 725 megawatts of installed capacity, and in a couple of years it will go up to 935 megawatts. We will have huge investments on this, but of course, energy transition is of the interest of our industrial facilities. One of the main topics that we have is complying with the Green Deal. Iron and steel is important, a priority, because it is emission intense. We're trying to have, we're just working on the roadmap for decarbonization and also net zero. And 7% of the global emission is from iron and steel for us. So it's actually a huge emission, and we need to reduce it significantly, no doubt about it. And Borçelik, we also have scientific-based approaches as PPI, trying to have a reduction accordingly. We made such a pledge by 2023, and Borçelik in Turkey is the responsible steel certificate. As a Turkish company receiving that certificate, which is so important for energy transition and reducing emissions in taking these types of certificates. Another company, Borusan Pipe, we had 15 decarbonization projects and $1.7 million worth of investment for all these projects. Of course, specific for these two companies, we also have solar and wind investments together with our energy company. Borçelik in particular, last year had 15 megawatts of wind and again WPP project. Up to 45 to 50 of a capacity increase would be the case. Besides port, logistics, automotive, also in those, we're just trying to do some energy transition, like 6 megawatts of a solar, power plant, investment that we made, both for the main company and the subsidiaries. So energy, we're just trying to move from fossil fuels to the renewables. But you should not limit yourself. Energy efficiency is also so important, as mentioned at COP28. For energy efficiency, you have to use technology. It requires expertise, know-how. And Borçelik has a couple of projects which I would like to mention. There is actually digital in the galvanized steel rods. using an alternative, you have make a digital twin in artificially, and just without having any quality loss, with the use of less energy, try to create efficiency. In the galvanized steel line, we did it. With this project from the Ministry of Science and Industry for Energy Efficiency and Decarbonization Project, in that category, in energy efficiency awards, we actually were the first winner. And there's 475,000 cubic meters of a reduction in natural gas consumption by the company. This could be inspiring. Another issue which is important to us, in steel production, there are two different technologies. One from the iron ore production, and the other one is from scraps. From scrap, steel production was not actually preferable. But now, in between these two technologies, there's actually a five-fold of a difference in terms of energy efficiency in both production styles. So 5%, which is for scrap, from production from scrap, we move it up to 26%, so we'll have more energy efficiency. Another thing is about logistics. For logistics and land transportation, as you all know, quite emission intense, especially in developed countries, representing 1/3 of all global emissions coming from logistics. Different models can be used: land transport, rail transport, or marine transport, so different modalities. And as we have Borusan Logistics, again, within the scope of decarbonization, we're doing an intermodal transport modality at a certain level: marine, then rail, then through the end, land transport. At least 200 combined different modalities will be used, and we started it. Of course, it provides for an energy efficiency, and route optimization is another issue to have more energy efficiency. At Borusan Logistics, by the Ministry of Transportation, we received a green logistics certificate, being one of the first companies doing so in Turkey. So energy transition, energy efficiency is a must, is a priority. We're making use of the power of technology and collaborating with different stakeholders, also among the group members and the group companies, like Borusan BB is helping us for that. Maybe this is an advantage of being a holding, and you can actually have a synergy, and we're making maximum use of it. Thank you very much. Great example. Twin factory. You mentioned also using scraps for production of steel, and I think very good example for circularity just mentioned. So quite inspiring examples. Thank you for that. Filiz Gökler. There is the synergy of being a holding and the collaboration discussed about this, but also I think it's mostly innovation ecosystem and trying to develop collaboration among your field of operation. So without being a holding or a portfolio of companies, how do you do it if you share? I also will continue to give some examples, but maybe I should start by, in the fight against climate change, as my colleague stated, is an emergency and great scale. I mean, until 2030, if we fail to do 70% of what we should do by 2040 and 2050, things would be so difficult for us and for our children. And what we have to do is to actually leave a better future for our children, a cleaner future, and we should act all together. By saying we should act all together, in terms of cooperation, you can't do it alone. We need our partners, our stakeholders, and with the common mind that we should work with. Now, sustainable operations should also be managed collectively. And Baker has several good works on this, especially for the last 7 or 8 years. We introduced so many different projects, especially this multi-partner approach. There's $2.1 million worth of investment that we made. So it's not only heavy industry or energy intense industry, if I have to give. With the partnership of Baker, HIF Global, maybe you heard about that, high innovative field. And it's actually a good fuel company, renewable energy, green hydrogen, transformed carbon dioxide. In these types of fuel, trying to reduce carbon emission, several projects are performed and given support to different countries. Just Global, Baker had a memorandum that work collectively, also in different industrial fields, trying to offer these solutions. On the top of this, another example, Air Products company. We acquired that company. Again, both in energy generation, cogeneration, compressor, steam solutions. What we did with Air Products, just as an example, I'm sharing it, by the way, on the top of Borusan Holding, an OLC, a series of gas turbines. Novel 5 megawatts to 20 megawatts of power capacity, especially in industrial fields, using a compressor and a gas turbine set. When compared to the conventional systems, what is the difference? Can work with hydrogen as a fuel. So for L series, there is actually 15 to 20% of, again, mixed, and even 100% of hydrogen can well be used. So with Novelty 16 series, without changing the design or engineering, you can use the same product. It's just one of the examples on electromechanical side. And there's also, just like you mentioned, there's the digital side of it. Digitalization and artificial intelligence has brought so many good things and contribute a lot for the net zero target. And as Baker in 2023, at 3 main different platforms we have announced, and now we're sharing it with our stakeholders as an example of a collaboration, Cordon, Luspa, and Corba. Cordon for in industrial facilities at the industry about asset management and performance management, such a platform. And it is total about energy optimization, operational optimization and efficiency. RESPA is in oil and gas fields, again, just example for your digital, by making a field analysis, simulating it, and trying to provide for any working. And Cordo, from the other side, offering digital solutions by integrating it to the entire field, like wages, water, air, gas, greenhouse gas, making some calculations, measurements, and trying to have the maximum operational productivity of that facility. So as the Baker, I just provided with 5 or different companies, and we are just working in collaboration. So not possible to walk on the path of net zero without any collaboration or cooperation. Maybe on the top of this, what I can say about these mergers and acquisitions, looking at the leading energy, oil and gas companies, we also have incubation programs and some partnerships. It could be project-based, it could be developing a specific project. Helps for financing opportunities because you share the financing there and you share the technologies, so it helps you to have better, more productive projects. In our region in particular, ADNOC, Abu Dhabi Oil Company, and Aramco, it's Saudi oil company. We're working closely for green hydrogen production and having drilling efficiency in oil and gas fields, energy efficiency. We do co-financing. And both in Turkey and in other countries, we're trying to deploy it. Well, against climate change, I don't know, fight, maybe better to say war, we're going through that. And our war against climate change only possible with the parties that we collaborate with and cooperate with. And it's not only energy producers, but also energy consumers. The entire society, all the companies should do about this and work for common, denominator. Thank you. Now you can talk. Thank you, Filiz. Now, for better management of time, because we have to finish by again noon, 12:30. For Ebru and Mehtap, one more question, and then maybe in one or two sentences, if there are some closing remarks, we can share it with us. But my question specifically to Ebru Edin is, of course, right now it is the Sustainable Development Society hat that you're sitting on this chair, but as you all know, it's actually a financial experience that you have also from your past position, previous positions. That's the question from there. And the financial limits, as you all know, for the business world, can act as an obstacle for companies to go further. So, from this perspective, what are the financial challenges that the business world has, and what type of different financing strategies we should be using? Actually, I've got a lot to tell on this topic, but don't worry, I will wrap it up quickly. Now, globally, first I would like to say, up to 2050, 200 trillion US dollars worth of financing required for green transformation. It means 7 trillion US dollars on a yearly basis. For Turkey, according to the analysis by the World Bank, 75 to 100 billion US dollars worth of investment that we're speaking about. For transmission and for the grid, the minister said 10 billion US dollars. So it's a huge amount of money for investment and financing. So I don't want to demotivate you, because as a Turkish banks, we, in the past 15 to 20 years, just let alone the last 5 years, 50 to 60 billion dollars of financing provided for the energy industry. Of course, we had the thermal power plants and so on, all in that portfolio. But the Turkish banks, under the macroeconomic conditions are favorable, then can possibly have such a financing. We have the expertise, the competency, and the potential to do this, which is a good thing. But what is bad is that the macro economic conditions are not favorable right now. So at the macro level, we need an improvement, at least to reach these targets. Why? Because as the banks, it was up to 15, 17 years of project finances that we had in the past, and 20-25% of equity used at that time. But looking at the terms now, the Turkish banks, not possible to do, very difficult. They have to be very selective, and even if so, the costs are so high. And for the IRLs and return for investment of the investors, not quite good for financing purposes. And the other thing is that rather than 20% of capital, even the models within the project that will provide for the financing is just down, requires 25 to 30% of capital equity. So for the investors, they have to think twice. That's number one. Another thing is, in the past, we actually had different investors that could do the job, but right now, only those with good balance sheets, with good financial tables, can only possibly do these investments. So, free competition is not as good as the previous years. So, in terms of Turkey, in terms of maybe having a divergence among the investors, something negative. Another nice thing, all these banks, I'm just trying to say good things and bad things at the same time, and sustainable energy for the sustainable trades, the companies have nice commitments, both at the international level and locally. They would like to do it, but there is the need for a good environment to do so. At least we are the priority industry. We just need to put the tap on. It's not only banks that you can get financing, local banks, international banks, but we also should check the other capital markets. Unfortunately, in Turkey, looking at the capital markets and the funds, the other, for the long-term investors, I don't think we have enough regulations. There is need for more incentives. For example, pension fund can actually be used for financing an energy investment. It's the business world we're speaking about. What is working is that there must be actually a recognition, an award, or a punishment. No other mechanism would work. So for the regulatory authorities, just like the first question I asked and I answered, I said we need a holistic approach. We'll be doing these, we need these resources for this. We have these teams that can provide for these resources, so we need a holistic approach for this. So capital markets should develop. In particular, to actually empower capitals, there's the need for different commodities and products. And I got a lot to tell, but maybe lastly, looking at the already existing investments, and especially for those who are operating in the environments that are not good for green transformation, they have to do it immediately. Otherwise, the banks would never give loans. For these companies, even the credit required for the regular, normal production activities, from coal, we will, for example, in that year, be free from coal or free from iron and steel. It's not possible to actually go on with a business only without credit. You need at least a letter of credit. So it's very important for them to be ready for this. So for the business world, we actually need the business lines that can do this green transformation. It's okay, maybe the microeconomic environment is not perfect, but at least there is the willingness, the expertise required for this, which is a good thing, but we need to be prepared. We should be able to do the proper investments and good reporting. As my colleague stated, reporting is so critical because you have to show the big picture to the credit institutions in the best way possible. It must be transparent. Again, with the performance and the non-performance. It's not like focusing on the good sides. And as you all know, everyone is doing perfectly well. If I ask the audience, you all would say we're doing great, but we also have so many flaws. Those flaws at the same time should be addressed loudly. Just like, for example, it's okay, I just have that much amount coming not from so good resources, but I will improve just by making these investments with the loan or the credit that I will get from your side. So it's very important, the very last sentences that you mentioned. And if we do not act at the same pace, for example, if we actually no more have financing for the regular production, it's also not good for demand, consumption, habits, and so on. So we should be able to do everything all together. I don't know, maybe there are a few good examples in the world, good practices, but not much. So I now will move to Mehtap. We actually have 10 minutes left. 5 minutes, and then for you, and then for the last 5 minutes, the closing remarks. So in this transformation, of course, including financing, you can also mention about the other resources required for this. What are the resources and access to the resources required by the businesses today?
Küresel yatırım ihtiyacı Ebru Hanım'ın.
The need for global investment is quite high, as Ebru Hanım said. Essentially, for the first time in 2023, fossil fuels surpassed by renewables, which I think is a very good development. We are speaking about 15% versus 24% of a pace there. So by 2030, we would expect to have a continuous increase, even for steps. $3.2 billion of an investment is required for 2030. What should be done for this? We keep saying, but once again, political and regulatory regimes should undergo effective changes. I mean, it should be supported by a willingness in this direction. Our countries and our institutions, I mean, whichever that might be. And we also need a well-structured program as well as a project pipeline to be created. And of course, we need international support, which is quite strong. It's not only about information sharing, but at the same time, money sharing. As Ebru Edin said, the problem is about the energy needs of developed economies. It's basically about a transformation of the energy need of developed economies, but the money doesn't exist in these companies or countries. And the capital and the needs are in different locations. I mean, if you look at the pension funds in the world, the largest 7 funds are Australian, Japanese, Canadian, Dutch, Swiss, American, and British funds. And the investment needs of these countries matching with the distribution of these resources to developing countries is not proper. Particularly through bankable roads, it's not, I mean, it's not employed yet. There we need to work with the banks to, particularly off-takers, I think we need for these risks. When I was working for Borusan, I remember an action that we took with Garanti Bank. There were projects that were not bankable in project financing, and in terms of the wind regimes, from time to time, the production took place, and there were weaknesses in terms of providing a continuity of production. Therefore, we had to join the supplies and make use of more major supply schemes. And then we ended up by saying that we are trying to make an optimization of these supplies, but why not to make a common approach in the cash flows? Because then we would have a smoother cash flow to be achieved on the basis of days and months. There wouldn't be a high release one, maybe in the region of Balıkesir, and the other maybe in the peak of the Taurus Mountains in Mut. Actually, different timings are provided for the wind regimes and tariffs. When we joined them together as a single company, as we named the big one, Wind Bundle, our cash flow of these companies would make more sense. Actually, the creative solutions of Garanti Bank made it to create a bankable process. So it is important to collaborate. I mean, the institutions and the banks should be working together. In Turkey, of course, there is a good advantage that we can speak about. In the period until 2018, Turkey made use of the 2 opportunities, because then finance was cheaper and our macro realities were quite available for the supply of them. As Turkey, we really used this as a good opportunity. Then we lost pace in wind, and the regulation was basically about very high initial investment, and the exams that used to supply funds for this were not that eager to do so. But on the solar side, I mean, we're going quite well. Investment-wise, Turkey seems to be at the same level as America. I mean, 1% of the world's solar production represented by the country. So as to create bankable projects, one of the biggest problems is the foreign currency risk. All developing countries, not except for China, because it may be self-dependent, is subject to foreign currency exchange risk. these countries on a US dollar basis or euro basis will have to borrow, and essentially we need mechanisms to be able to manage this. If you would leave me, I would speak indefinitely, but I need to stop now. Well, thank you very much. As the last round, I would like to ask you to close your eyes and, future sustainable energy, the three things that would come to your mind, the three words that would rapidly come to your mind for the future of sustainable energy.
Bunu söyleyeceğim.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is cooperation, because in this transformation, the private sector, the public, societies, academicians should work together, develop together. Another thing is actually a risk that comes to my mind. It's actually a long marathon. Just like Mr. Birol stated, we should not give up. And there are certain risks, and in particular, like moving production from one region to the other is not good for the economy of the country and for employment. So there is the need to make good investment. So that's what I can say. So two things I said rather than three. So it's enthusiasm. There's an enthusiasm and the capacity to do it, because I've been in the business world for 30 years and the resilience is so strong. So I'm actually feeling promising about the future. So what would you say? I totally agree with Ebru. We are just at war, and that we have started, and we will turn it to our children for their future. We should work together on this. And the second thing is that in the upcoming 3 decades, $375 trillion required for reducing emission, which is actually quite high for the global GDP and a big share, but there is no such money on the table. So we actually have to revise our priorities and strategies for this. Thank you. Well, for myself, of course, cooperation, as you mentioned, but as the corporates and the countries, if you're asking me, we should actually take disruptive risks. What actually can destroy me? We should open our eyes. Why? Because your industry would not last forever. You can only survive just by complying, and maybe not so meaningful. So, from that perspective, I guess we should follow the development and then, together with the stakeholders, how we are going to compete, as mentioned by all. And it actually should be deployed and throughout the entire supply chain, downstream, upstream. And whoever is being subject to any tax anywhere, how it's just going to be shared. So there's a need to develop strategies on this. And at the country level, in the past, we had state planning organization that was doing it. So we also need a holistic approach as such for this climate transformation. Thank you very much to you as well. So this is the end of the panel. We discussed about the concept itself initially, and you offered us with some best practices, different strategies, how we can actually implement them, and then the obstacles, the challenges that we have in terms of finance, regulations, and so great examples. You share actually nice thoughts with us. Thank you very much for each and every one of you. So it's cooperation, enthusiasm, energy. We should never lose hope. Financing as a must. Technology, especially future technologies, disruptive technologies, what they could be, and resilience. Resilience, as you all know, both for Turkey and developing countries, for those who are working in such countries, living in such countries, is a skill that we should develop and we all develop. But of course, there is a must also in this field. So thank you very much for all the panelists, one by one, and to the participants for joining us. And of course to IICEC for, again, Mr. Birol, and for IICEC for bringing us together. So we'll continue to discuss all these issues in the future. So that's the end of the conference. Thank you.